In 2002, psychologists Delroy Paulhus and Kevin Williams identified three distinct but related personality configurations that cluster together more often than chance can explain: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. They named this cluster the Dark Triad. Each type is different in how it presents, what it wants, and how it operates. What they share is a complete willingness to exploit other people to get it. Dark Triad research has moved from academic journals into mainstream awareness because the behavior patterns are everywhere: in workplaces, in relationships, in online spaces, in positions of power. The more people understand exactly what each type looks like in practice, the earlier the pattern gets recognized. And early recognition is the only point in the timeline where the damage can be substantially limited. The three types present very differently on the surface. A narcissist, say, looks like a confident, magnetic person who talks about themselves too much. A Machiavellian looks like a charming, strategic networker. A psychopath looks like the most likable person in the room. The surface presentation varies enormously. What lies underneath it, the willingness to use people as instruments without guilt, is consistent across all three. Most people picture narcissism as grandiose, the loud, self-promoting, attention-commanding type. And grandiose narcissism is real and relatively easy to spot. The more dangerous variant is covert narcissism. The covert narcissist presents as quiet, sensitive, often as a victim. They express their entitlement through martyrdom, passive aggression, and subtle manipulation rather than overt dominance. They are significantly harder to identify and frequently more damaging in close relationships. Narcissists, both types, operate on a fuel they can't generate internally. It's called narcissistic supply: external validation, admiration, attention, or emotional reactions, including negative ones. The supply cycle drives all their behavior. When supply is abundant, they can be extraordinarily generous and engaging. When supply runs low, through boredom, perceived criticism, or loss of control, the mask slips and the punishing behavior begins: the bow. At the center of every narcissistic presentation, grandiose or covert, is a bedrock sense of entitlement. The belief that their needs supersede others, that rules apply to other people but not to them, that they deserve exceptional treatment as a baseline rather than something to be earned. This entitlement is not always visible early. It reveals itself in how they respond to being told no, to having their narrative challenged, or to not being prioritized. The often cited empathy deficit in narcissism is real but frequently misunderstood. Many narcissists can intellectually identify what another person is feeling, what researchers call cognitive empathy. What they lack is affective empathy, the automatic, felt response to someone else's emotional state. They can map your pain without experiencing any echo of it. This is what makes sustained compassion impossible and makes them able to continue harmful behavior without internal conflict. Narcissists do not target randomly. They are consistently drawn to people who have abundant empathy, strong sense of responsibility, difficulty setting boundaries, and high capacity for self-reflection and self-blame. These traits make for an ideal supply source and a person who will work hard to repair the relationship after incidents rather than leaving. The qualities that make you compassionate and loyal are exactly the qualities that make you a preferred target. When a narcissist ends a relationship, or when a target leaves, the typical response includes a smear campaign, a coordinated effort to damage the other person's reputation with mutual contacts before they can share their own version of events. The narcissist understands that narrative control is everything. The smear campaign is not emotional. It is strategic image management, designed to preempt the story that would otherwise emerge. Covert narcissists are among the most difficult Dark Triad presentations to identify because their primary tool is victimhood. They present as deeply sensitive, perpetually misunderstood, chronically let down by everyone around them. The manipulation is executed through passive aggression, guilt induction, silent treatment, and emotional withdrawal rather than overt dominance. They receive their supply through others' concern and caretaking rather than overt admiration. The mechanism is identical. the delivery is reversed. The early detection signals for narcissism are consistent across both types. Conversations that consistently return to them regardless of starting point. An inability to genuinely celebrate another person's success without reframing it in relation to themselves. A pattern of stories in which they are always the misunderstood protagonist. And, most reliably, how they respond when you disagree with them, even mildly, or when you decline something they want. Machiavellianism is named for Niccolò Machiavelli's 16th century treatise on political power, in which manipulation, deception, and strategic betrayal are presented as neutral tools of statecraft. The Machiavellian personality applies this framework to personal and professional relationships. They are long-game players. Every conversation, every favor, every relationship is assessed for its strategic value. They do not interact, they position, and they are usually several moves ahead. A Machiavellian's social circle is not a collection of friends. It is a managed portfolio. Each person in their network serves a purpose: information access, status, leverage, or utility. They invest heavily in relationships where the return is high and exit cleanly when the value expires. They maintain the appearance of loyalty through carefully timed generosity, gifts, favors, support, deployed precisely when those gestures will produce maximum strategic return. Machiavellians operate on timelines that most people don't recognize as intentional. A favor done 18 months ago that you may have half forgotten will be invoked precisely when it produces maximum leverage. A piece of information shared in confidence will be filed and deployed when circumstances make it most useful. This temporal extension of strategy is what makes Machiavellians distinctly difficult to defend against. By the time a play is executed, the setup is invisible. Machiavellians lie differently from the other Dark Triad types. They don't lie compulsively or for pleasure. They lie when the cost-benefit analysis supports it, which is frequently. Their lies are typically strategic omissions or partial truths rather than outright fabrications, because partial truth is harder to disprove and easier to maintain. They are adept at misdirection, answering a different question from the one asked, or redirecting to information that obscures what they want hidden. The most reliable signal of a Machiavellian is the ratio of information received to information shared. Machiavellians are expert listeners who ask precise questions and reveal almost nothing about themselves that isn't calculated. Early in a relationship, this can read as attentiveness. Later, the asymmetry becomes clear. They know everything about you, and you know only what they chose to show you. Their personal life remains strategically obscured. Machiavellians disproportionately succeed in hierarchical institutions, corporate environments, politics, academia, finance, because those environments reward the skills of coalition building, strategic communication, and impression management that Machiavellians have refined to an art. They identify who holds power, who is ascending, and who is declining, and position themselves accordingly, often before others perceive the shift. Working alongside a Machiavellian without understanding the pattern is a significant strategic disadvantage. The primary defense against a Machiavellian is information hygiene. Assume that anything you share will eventually be used strategically, not necessarily maliciously, but instrumentally. Keep your vulnerabilities, ambitions, fears, and private information genuinely private. Watch the asymmetry in information exchange. If you find yourself consistently revealing more than you receive, recalibrate the relationship accordingly. A Machiavellian loses leverage precisely when you hold more back. Psychopathy is the most misrepresented personality type in the Dark Triad, shaped by decades of fictional portrayals that bear almost no relationship to the research. The clinical profile of psychopathy involves a significantly diminished fear response, reduced emotional reactivity, shallow affect, impulsivity in some variants, and a pervasive inability to form genuine emotional bonds. Most psychopaths are not violent. Most are functioning at a high level in ordinary social environments. Many are charismatic. The psychopathic presentation in social environments is frequently one of the most disarming in the Dark Triad. Because psychopaths don't experience social anxiety, they project a calm, confident ease that reads as natural charisma. They make sustained eye contact. They remember details. They are highly attuned to what you want to hear. Because they have learned to read and perform social cues without the distorting noise of their own emotional responses. The charm is technically accomplished and entirely constructed. The research on psychopathic emotional experience is more nuanced than the popular understanding suggests. Psychopaths do experience emotions, but the range is narrower, and the intensity is significantly lower than in neurotypical individuals. They experience excitement, irritation, boredom, and transient pleasure. What they do not experience reliably is guilt, remorse, sustained affection, or fear. The absence of these specific emotions is what makes sustained harm possible without the internal braking mechanisms that stop most people. The diminished fear response that characterizes psychopathy manifests as genuine risk tolerance that most people cannot match. Physical risk, social risk, legal risk. The threat of consequence that controls most people's behavior registers at a much lower level. This produces the bold, decisive action style that can look like leadership, and in some high-stakes environments is genuinely effective. It is also what makes psychopaths capable of harms that other Dark Triad types would calculate as too risky. Research distinguishes between primary psychopathy, a largely neurological configuration with a strong genetic component, and secondary psychopathy, which develops as an adaptive response to severe trauma or adverse environment. Primary psychopaths tend to be more calculated and controlled. Secondary psychopaths tend toward more impulsive, reactive behavior. The distinction matters for prediction and for understanding what intervention, if any, is possible. Both variants cause significant harm in close personal relationships. Early behavioral signals of psychopathy include stories about past relationships or conflicts in which the other person always bears complete responsibility. A pattern of broken commitments with fluent, convincing explanations. Escalating behavior with no apparent learning curve. The same patterns repeat without modification. Shallow, rapidly shifting emotional states that don't match the apparent significance of events. And a specific reaction to perceived disrespect that is disproportionate, cold, and often strategically delayed rather than immediate. The three types frequently co-occur. Research indicates that individuals scoring high in one Dark Triad dimension typically score elevated across all three. The overlap makes sense. The traits are functionally complementary. Narcissism provides the entitlement to exploit. Machiavellianism provides the strategic capability. Psychopathy removes the guilt that would otherwise constrain behavior. A person high across all three is not merely difficult. They represent a qualitatively different level of interpersonal danger. Some researchers now argue for a dark tetrad, adding everyday sadism as a fourth dimension. Sadism, in this context, does not mean extreme behavior. It means the derivation of genuine pleasure from others' pain, humiliation, or distress. Its presence in combination with the other three creates a particularly dangerous configuration, someone who not only lacks restraint against causing harm, but is actively motivated by it. The tetrad concept is relatively new but gaining traction in the research literature. Dark Triad individuals show measurable attraction to other Dark Triad individuals, particularly in professional and romantic contexts. The pattern makes strategic sense. They recognize the tactics, respect the capability, and understand that a relationship between two players operates on honest terms. They don't need to perform emotional vulnerability with someone who sees through the performance anyway. These alliances can be extremely effective and spectacularly destructive when they eventually break down. Decades of research have attempted to identify reliable early signals of Dark Triad personality. Two findings are consistent. First, highly attractive, well-dressed individuals are rated as more trustworthy, and Dark Triad individuals disproportionately invest in physical presentation precisely because they understand that appearance operates as social currency. Second, the most reliable predictor of all three types is how they speak about their exes and former associates. Consistent, total demonization is a pattern. The most practical protective tool for new relationships, personal or professional, is the 90-day rule. For the first 90 days, observe pattern over content. What they say matters far less than what they consistently do. Dark Triad individuals maintain the presentation during the idealization phase, but patterns leak through. The 90-day window is long enough to reveal the first cracks, if you're observing behavior rather than being captivated by the performance. Calibrated trust means extending trust incrementally, proportional to demonstrated reliability over time, rather than extending it fully based on charm, intensity, or the compelling feeling of being understood. Dark Triad individuals generate the feeling of deep connection rapidly and deliberately because they understand it produces trust faster than time does. The counter is simple. Let time do its work. Reserve your deepest trust for the people who have been consistent across all conditions, not just comfortable ones. If you recognize a Dark Triad pattern in a current relationship, the most important first move is not action. It is information. Understand specifically what type you're dealing with, because the tactics that protect against a narcissist are different from those that work against a Machiavellian. Then build your exit or containment strategy around that specific profile. Confronting a Machiavellian with their tactics is rarely effective. Managing information flow is know your opponent. The goal of understanding the Dark Triad is not paranoia, it is calibration. Most people you encounter are not Dark Triad, but the damage that one Dark Triad individual can cause in a relationship, a workplace, or a social circle is disproportionate to their number. The people most protected are not the most suspicious. They are the ones who understand the patterns clearly enough that they can recognize them early, trust their instincts, and act on what they see.